Doamnelor și domnilor, bună dimineața, bine ați venit! Într-un final optimist ne întâlnim cu finanțatorii unui grant pe care Muzeul Maramureșan l-a primit anul trecut. Și cu această ocazie aș vrea să introduc câteva cuvinte de bun venit. În primul rând, avem alături de noi pe doamna director Mirela Bars, care ne va spune câteva cuvinte sau mesajul ei de bun venit partenerilor noștri, respectiv Departamentul de Stat al Americii.
Bună ziua tuturor, domnule primar, domnule atașat cultural din Canada, șeful misiunii, adjunctul misiunii diplomatice al ambasadei SUA, domnul Elie Wiesel. Bine ați venit la Sighet din Marmație, bine ați venit la Muzeul Maramureșan, bine ați venit la Casa Memoriala Elie Wiesel. Este o onoare pentru noi, iată că într-un final am reușit să câștigăm un grant prin fondul ambasadorial pentru prezervarea culturii, culturală. Ambasada SUA este singura ambasadă care oferă astfel de granturi culturale pentru instituțiile din România. Să știți că nu este primul proiect pe care noi l-am aplicat prin ambasada SUA. La depunerea proiectului am mai aplicat încă un proiect pentru Muzeul Satului, respectiv conservarea caselor restaurate în Muzeul Satului, care aparțin minorităților naționale, care au locuit de-a lungul secolelor aici în Maramureș. Totodată țin să menționez faptul că moștenirea evreiască a fost pentru prima dată reprezentată în Muzeul Satului Maramureșan de la Sighet Marmației, odată cu restaurarea casei care a aparținut familiei Trimăr din Tursana. Aceste granturi sunt o oportunitate pentru muzeele mici, cum suntem noi, pentru că fondurile pentru cultură întotdeauna sunt mici, iar aceste granturi ne oferă și ne dă șansa de a restaura, de a conserva, de a proteja patrimoniul cultural pe care noi îl deținem. Vă mulțumim încă o dată pentru prezența noastră aici. Vă urăm bun venit încă o dată la noi, la Muzeul Satului Maramureșan. Vă invităm să vizitați și celelalte secții ale muzeului pe care noi le avem în administrare. Iar despre proiectul în sine nu voi continua eu, pentru că alături de noi este Alina Marincean, care este managerul de proiect. Și ea va fi cea care ne va face o prezentare a ce a însemnat acest proiect, ce s-a reușit să se facă și ce urmează încă să se realizeze în cadrul acestui proiect. Vă mulțumesc tuturor, mulțumim presei sighetene, care, iată, și nu numai, și presei naționale, care de fiecare dată răspund invitației noastre și promovează muzeul nostru cu ocazia diferitelor evenimente pe care noi le organizăm. Vă mulțumesc!
Mulțumim și noi. Domnule primar, vă rugăm.
Bună dimineața! Excelențele voastre, bine ați venit la Sighet Marmație și vă mulțumim pentru interesul pe care l-ați acordat acest obiectiv deosebit important pentru sigheteni, pentru Muzeul Maramureșan. Este o zi importantă pentru noi, atât pentru muzeu și pentru comunitatea sigheteană. Și ne bucurăm să vedem astăzi acest edificiu de mare valoare, unde a plecat marele Elie Wiesel. Beneficiază de susținere financiară și din partea ambasadei Americii. Desigur, noi aici avem mai multe proiecte, dar împreună, chiar dacă spunea colega managerul de la muzeu că sunt sume mici, împreună, din mai multe surse, putem face ceva grandios pentru acest muzeu și în memoria lui Elie Wiesel și memoria evreilor deportați și care au de suferit după timpul cel de-al doilea război mondial. Ne bucurăm să avem parteneri, să avem finanțatori până la urmă și important este să vă aplicați și spre micile comunități și să păstrăm vie istoria acestor locuri. Și nu pot decât să vă mulțumesc încă o dată și mulțumesc tuturor și sperăm că acest proiect să meargă mai departe, parteneriatul nostru să continue, pentru că avem nevoie să fim parteneri în mai multe domenii de activitate, nu numai în domeniul cultural. Vă mulțumesc pentru toate deschiderea oferită nouă comunității sighetene și Muzeului Maramureșan.
Mulțumim, domnule primar. Acord cuvântul adjunctului șef misiunii diplomatice americane în România, domnul Dixon.
Thank you, Director Bars. Mayor Moldovan, Director Bars, and Coordinator Mayor Chian, it is a pleasure to join you here. Mayor Moldovan, thank you for our meeting yesterday. I came away from it very informed. And good morning, everyone. And thank you for welcoming me and our embassy team to Sighet. Your region's reputation for hospitality and historical beauty are clearly well-founded. Our nations and our peoples stand on 142 years of a diplomatic bedrock founded on friendship. Our partnership is not nascent, nor is it new or untested. Throughout our shared history, there are moments that are definitional. From a spring day in 1878, when our then Galatz-based U.S. consul arrived in Bucharest to deliver U.S. President Rutherford B. Hayes' letter acknowledging Romanian independence and sovereignty, to our well-known Red Cross efforts in the years following World War I, the United States and its peoples have always striven for the best for our friends and now allies, the Romanian people. As I know many of you are aware, we have just marked another defining bilateral moment. 25 years since the signing of the U.S.-Romanian Strategic Partnership. 25 years since President Clinton proclaimed in Piața Universității, the Romanian people have won the world's respect for moving so far, so fast, and for believing in yourselves and your future. He could not have been more prescient in what he saw in this nation and its peoples, nor could have Romania's former president, Constantinescu, when he replied, "We have laid this bridge built by human beings across an ocean which God has set between you and us. It is a bridge of common values." Together, these two greats created our strategic partnership, and thank goodness they did. The benefits of this quarter century of alliance, friendship, and partnership are remarkable. They are tangible, and the world is the better and safer for them. It is in that spirit of open friendship that I join you here today. Friends and allies protect and preserve the treasures of those they stand alongside. Romania's incredibly long history and its unique blend of cultures and people's lives in its natural patrimony. Its stories, your stories, eternally dwell in the art, the literature, the architecture, and the memories that define this nation. When a real friend has the chance to help preserve this, not just for Romania, but for all humanity, it must. That brings me to the Ambassador's Fund for Cultural Preservation, a government program of which I could not be prouder. Since its inception in 2000, this fund has helped the U.S. Department of State preserve historic sites, manuscripts, museum collections, and traditional forms of expression in countless countries. We at Embassy Bucharest have maximized this tool to enormous effect. I am markedly proud that we have funded over $1 million in renovations and preservation efforts across Romania. For several years, over $500,000 grant for the restoration of the fortified church and Almavi was the world's largest. This year is no exception. We have just secured an additional $60,000 in funding for the preservation of the Jewish cemetery in Alba Iulia. These endeavors are indeed costly, but the results are priceless. If we lose these human treasures, they will be gone forever. This is precisely why we are here in celebration of the renovation and restoration works at the living museum that is Elie Wiesel Memorial House. Our Ambassadors Fund grant is being used here to guarantee we never lose this reminder of both the indomitability of the human spirit and the ever-present ability of our species to slip into unspeakable evil. How could one possibly assign a cost value to these walls, which are so central to international Jewish heritage, this region's unique culture, and to all peoples? Preserving this monument could not be timelier. This is true both for practical reasons, it is always easier to preserve than to repair, but also for far more profound reasons. This home bears mute testimony to blind antipathy. And we are seeing far too much of this afoot once again. Your neighbors a kilometer away have been plunged into an unjust war by the same capital that wrought so much death and destruction in the 20th century. War and its fellow travelers of xenophobia and anti-Semitism are again loose on this continent. We see it here with malign influence and propaganda peddling, both by foreign state actors and domestic extremists. This is vile. I want to say that again. This is vile, and shame on them one and all. All we can do is be vigilant, counter with the truth, and remember. This museum will help us do just that. In beautiful Romania, a nation with the awful distinction of having lost among the very highest number of its innocent Jewish population to the Nazis and their co-conspirators, have a spectrum of nations. From a spectrum of nations, including its own, there is no alternative. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shane Dixon. Menționez că cei care doriți, și probabil toată lumea, versiunea în limba română, vă rog să treceți pe la Izabela, să vă lăsați adresa de e-mail și veți primi versiunea tradusă în limba română, să o puteți folosi pentru comunicatele dumneavoastră. Îmi vine mie rândul să vă fac o foarte scurtă prezentare a tot ce înseamnă acest proiect și o să mă mut acolo, o să vă rog să faceți un pic de loc ca să pot să proiectez câteva slide-uri cu ce înseamnă proiectul nostru. Pot să vă trimit pe mail și prezentarea. Să-mi ziceți dacă se vede bine sau să sting verburile. Se vede? Titlul acestui proiect este cât se poate de relevant, o casă istorică pentru o temă contemporană. Cred că vreodată Elie Wiesel, tot ceea ce a scris, a făcut, va deveni vreodată depășit. Așa că această casă, cu ajutorul acestui fond ambasadorial, va rămâne cu siguranță de acum încolo pentru generațiile viitoare. Proiectul a început la sfârșitul anului trecut și se derulează pe 12 luni. Așa cum știți deja, Departamentul de Stat este finanțator. Bugetul este aproape $80.000. Scopul acestui proiect a fost, în primul rând, integritatea fizică și arhitecturală a clădirii. Era deosebit de important ca la 20 de ani, după ce acest muzeu a fost deschis în 2002, să revenim puțin, să verificăm sănătatea și să trecem la o scanare efectivă a tot ce înseamnă starea fizică a clădirii. Asta implicit pentru a adăposti în siguranță colecțiile muzeale și, desigur, cea de-a treia componentă este moștenirea lui Elie Wiesel și promovarea moștenirii sale ca parte din cultura locală și, desigur, cultura noastră națională. Obiectivele majore sunt reabilitarea clădirii și o să vedem imediat ce a presupus acest pas. Conservarea patrimoniului evreiesc prin obiectele și colecțiile pe care le avem și prin achiziția altor obiecte și promovarea moștenirii culturale a lui Elie Wiesel. În ceea ce privește urmările, nouă ne place să credem că acest proiect, în acest context al Muzeului Maramureșan al Casei Memoriale, presupune conștientizarea responsabilității și transformării sociale a muzeului. Muzeul, prin această generație și poate începând cu acest proiect, ne dorim să treacă la un alt nivel. Un mediu instituțional profesionist pe care noi îl vom organiza în acest muzeu prin tot ce înseamnă achiziția tehnologiei, amenajarea spațiilor în care personalul muzeului va lucra. O parte din acestea vor fi acoperite cu banii din fondurile acestui grant. Promovarea abordărilor participative a populației locale. Odată acest proiect început, am fost nevoit să intrăm în contact cu tot felul de organizații, cu organisme locale și cumva ne-am deschis și noi și ei și am sondat care este nivelul parteneriatelor pe care noi putem să le organizăm și cred că cel mai important este diversificarea metodologiilor de impact social. Un domn de la Study Tour, de la tinerii care au venit, ne întreabă de ce n-am mai folosit prima încăpere pentru întâlnirea de astăzi. Prin etapele pe care acest proiect le-a trecut deja, încercăm să schimbăm câteva lucruri și să definim spațiile într-un alt fel. Felul în care acest concept muzeal, această scenografie a fost gândită, încearcă să aducă câteva schimbări și de ce nu să fie un exemplu de bune practici pentru celelalte muzee din țară. Și ce am observat noi, că din ce în ce mai multe muzee deschid fie secții, fie expoziții. Nu o să intru în detalii, poate vom avea alte ocazii să discutăm despre acestea, dar cu siguranță sunt câteva dintre urmările acestui proiect. Rezultatele le trec în revistă, structura casei va fi consolidată. Asta înseamnă că subsolul casei a fost verificat, infiltrațiile apei au fost s-a trecut la un proces de revizuire a filtrației apei în pereți. Podul casei va fi izolat și va fi acoperit. S-au făcut reparații la sistemul de drenaj a apei pluviale, la acoperiș. Subsolul muzeului va fi transformat într-o cameră media și o cameră în care ne vom putea întâlni cu ocazia programelor educaționale. Muzeul până acum a adus lipsă de un spațiu destinat arhivei. De astăzi, mâine, probabil săptămâna viitoare, vom beneficia de organizarea acestui spațiu. Este în producție mobilieriul destinat arhivei și a depozitului pentru obiecte. Spațiul de cercetare atât de important. Tocmai povesteam cu tinerii dimineață, nu putem povesti nici despre Holocaust, nici despre antisemitism dacă nu povestim despre istoria evreilor. Toate trebuie să înceapă cu cultura și istoria evreilor și atunci în această încăpere va fi amenajat un spațiu în care lumea va putea veni să-și cerceteze rădăcinile, să cerceteze istoria evreilor, să consulte documente, cărți, biblioteca noastră și așa mai departe. Conservarea preventivă a fost un segment deosebit de important al acestui grant și va fi organizat un laborator de conservare preventivă. Asta o poate face și un muzeograf și un conservator, tot aici în muzeu. Spațiul exterior a fost modificat aproape complet și va fi destinat reflecției și evenimentelor în aer liber și, desigur, promovarea moștenirii evreiești a lui Elie Wiesel printr-o serie de evenimente cu public. Am ținut neapărat să vă arăt câteva dintre stadiile lucrărilor și oamenii care au participat la aceste lucrări. Îl vedeți pe domnul din mijloc și îmi place să-l menționez în mod deosebit pentru că această tehnică este una deja nemai folosită de foarte multă vreme și ne-am bucurat să găsim pe cineva care mai poate să facă acest tip de decorațiune. Ba mai mult, să știți că acest proiect nu este numai despre restaurare, nu este numai despre cultură, este în primul rând despre oameni. acest domn și-a adus nepoții la muzeu să vadă ce a făcut el pentru muzeu. Domnul dinainte de pescar a venit cu copiii să-i arate ce a făcut el. Ba mai mult, i-am lăsat singur câteva ore. Când am venit, unul dintre ei a chiar avut inițiativă și a vopsit un geam care, surprinzător, se potrivea. Adică oamenii aceștia au fost implicați dincolo de doar de a-și face treaba. Au fost puțin mai atenți cu ce fac, cu însemnătatea actelor lor, au simțit importanța muncilor sau contribuției lor, ceea ce mi se pare o urmare dincolo de ceea ce preconizam noi. Aș mai vrea să punctez în încăperea numărul 3 vitrina luminoasă care este în producție și trebuie să vină, dar deja veți vedea câteva dintre celelalte vitrine care tot așa au fost finanțate prin acest grant. Spațiul exterior va arăta cumva așa, acolo vedeți o schiță și a subsolului. Și aici spațiul de depozitare, de conservare. Impactul, desigur, este unul cât se poate de important, dezvoltarea unor procese democratice. Ne dorim noi prin creativitate, pentru că este un loc al creativității, al cunoașterii, dar și prin sensibilizare, pentru că tematica pe care noi o abordăm în acest muzeu trebuie neapărat să aibă o doză de sensibilizare în tot ceea ce privește societățile multiculturale, cum este cea de la Sighet, și experiență îmbunătățită prin tot ce înseamnă parteneriate și așa mai departe. Vă mulțumesc și aș dori din acest moment să deschid întrebările presei, dar nu numai, și o să vă rog să fie strict legate de acest proiect sau de detalii legate de fondul ambasadorial. Le puteți adresa în limba română și eu am să le traduc. Vă mulțumesc!
Ion Marici, de la Salut Sighet. Am înțeles domnule Wiesel, din explicarea noastră că fondul pentru România este de $1 milion. Am înțeles corect?
Is it correct that the money, the fund for Romania is consists in $1 million?
Across Romania.
Across Romania.
Yes, sir.
Da. Nu credeți că prin artă, cultură, se pot depăși toate barierele și chiar preîntâmpina, să zicem, preîntâmpina anumite războaie, n-ar fi poate mult mai util să majorați fondul?
Do you think that, because this fund is definitely important, do you think that enlarging this fund would be a way to find solutions, to fight wars maybe, through culture and art?
That is the goal. I mean, the goal is if we can restore culture, and for example, this house is the perfect example of if we can get the people to remember and understand each other, then we can hopefully in the future prevent those groups from going against one another. If that makes sense. Our goal is to bring people together, not separate. And unfortunately, there's a lot of governments that want to separate the people because that's how they stay in power. So, yes, to answer your question, the more that we can restore, the more that we can bring the culture back to the people that they deserve, then maybe in the future we can prevent the conflicts that unfortunately saw the Jewish population here in Sighet taken to Auschwitz. That's our goal, is to stop that in the future by having people remember their past.
Domnule Marișoară, este clar?
Să înțeleg că vor fi majorate fondurile în anul următor.
To be understood that the fund for Romania will be increased. That there will be more than $1 million.
Well, that is determined in Washington. We apply for money. There's a set amount of money in Washington, and we apply for it. Mm-hmm. And we did just get an extra $60,000 US dollars.
Basis, absolutely.
So yes, each year we apply. So yes, the goal is to increase it, but we have to apply each year.
Și în prelungirea acestei întrebări, probabil știți că Uniunea Europeană are fonduri transfrontaliere. Chiar colegii de aici sau prietenii, cum să le zicem, au proiecte aplicate pe acest fond european. Nu v-ați gândit o idee, n-ar putea fi o secțiune și pentru fonduri transfrontaliere prin fondul ambasadorial american? Cu Ucraina în special mă refer.
There's a European Union offer grants for a partnership between Romania and Ukraine, and we are part of one. And he was wondering if there would be any chance that United States will invest in such a grant, or to extend the ambassador fund to Ukraine to create this opportunity.
I'll be honest with you, it's controlled by embassies. So any ambassador's funds that go to Ukraine would have to be requested from the embassy in Kyiv.
Mm-hmm.
So the embassy here would have no control over that money. That has to come from each individual country.
Mm-hmm.
So I would love to have a different answer, but I can't answer for Kyiv.
Mm-hmm.
Dar totuși un parteneriat între ambasadele Statelor Unite din Kiev și București ar putea rezolva o problemă de genul ăsta.
A possible partnership between the two embassies from Kiev and Bucharest would be a way to solve the problem.
Well, first we have to get our embassy in Kyiv back up and running. So maybe in the future we can look into that. But right now, I believe the U.S. government's focus is on getting the actual embassy up and running right now.
Thanks.
Mulțumim. Altcineva?
Nu știu dacă e o întrebare
Out of border sau cum să zic. Există serviciul de voluntariat finanțat de Statele Unite, Peace Corps. Noi am avut câțiva voluntari în urmă cu 15-20 de ani, 2-3 voluntari foarte buni. Mai există? Funcționează?
Does the Peace Corps organization and services still active?
Oh, the Peace Corps is extremely active all over the world. But thankfully, Romania is in a good enough state where the Peace Corps does not come to Romania. Partially because you are an EU state, and second, the government here is very responsive to needs, and thus the environment here is not where the Peace Corps would normally go into. But yes, the Peace Corps exists. Thank you, John F. Kennedy. And they are doing great work all over the world.
I'm not sure how my English sounds, but I owe it to Miss Kyle. She was the first Peace Corps volunteer here in Sighet, but that was like 35 years ago or something like that.
Păi, acum dus în această idee, prelungire, avem multe colaborări cu, știu și cei de la multe colaborări cu organizații din Ucraina, din imediata apropiere a Ucrainei. Ei ar putea solicita acum, în momentul ăsta de război, voluntari Peace Corps.
Taking into consideration the context in Ukraine, would this be an appropriate time to ask for Peace Corps volunteers in Ukraine, do you think?
To be honest, I don't know where the Peace Corps is. The Peace Corps is an independent organization. They work with the Department of State, and we have certain agreements with them. For example, they have certain access to the embassy and other things like that. But in general, because they are a standalone independent organization, they make their own rules and regulations about where they go, how long they stay there. When a country is a quote-unquote graduate country, they make those decisions, not the Department of State. So I'd be remiss if I answered your questions because I'd be speaking on behalf of an organization that is outside my own.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Și ca să închei totuși.
Haideți!
Ca să creez emulație pentru ceilalți colegi. Am înțeles bine sau ați spus, beneficiază de finanțare instituțiile. Să înțeleg că instituțiile, ONG-urile nu sunt instituții, pot profita și ONG-urile de fondul ambasadorial să aplice pentru finanțare.
Do the NGOs get the chance to participate in the competition for the ambassador fund?
Oh,
Are they eligible?
we have many grants, and I will not speak on behalf of my colleague here who actually controls the grants. We have many, and yes, they can apply. We fund many NGOs through grants and through the Ambassadors Fund.
Yes, sir.
Right.
100%
So absolutely.
Some of our strongest partners, sir, have
Right.
been NGOs.
So absolutely. And there are many various grants that we give. Thus the $1 million that we have spread throughout Romania. So they went to various organizations that help.
For mini grant, there are other $1 million.
I'm doing my best.
Thanks.
Mulțumim, domnule Mariș, pentru interesul dumneavoastră. Altcineva? Aș mai dori să fac o mențiune pentru presă. Alături de noi se află un grup de tineri care sunt aici într-o vizită de studiu, de fapt se numește Elie Wiesel Study Tour și este a 5-a ediție în care ei participă și vin la Sighet, desigur de fiecare dată cu alți tineri, așa că întâlnirea de astăzi încearcă cumva să armonizeze aceste două componente, prezentarea grantului și a contribuției la restaurarea muzeului, dar și acest study tour. Îi vedeți pe tineri, cei care sunteți interesați de mai multe informații. Partenera noastră și colega noastră, Iuliana, se află dincolo și cred că ea este cea care vă poate răspunde la eventualele întrebări. Iuliana. Dacă nu mai sunt alte comentarii sau intervenții, eu am să încep o scurtă prezentare a tot ceea ce a însemnat acest grant și ce am reușit noi să facem. Și o parte, una dintre explicațiile pentru care noi ne aflăm astăzi în această încăpere este pentru că am vrut să aveți surpriza de a vedea noua amenajare din cele două încăperi. Cele două încăperi care sunt deja gata, sunt aproape în totalitate restaurate cu bani din acest fond. Tot ceea ce însemna decor pe tematică interbelică, obiecte noi cumpărate, toate fac parte din această finanțare. Așadar, o să o iau eu înainte. Cei care doriți să mă urmați, să veniți cu mine, să ne... I'm going to start with this room, which is supposed to be the blue room, and we've chosen the blue because it has very nuances, as we were speaking last night of nuances. So it's still dramatic, but still it gives some hope, because what Elie Wiesel wanted was to give some hope. Actually, when he came back in 2002 for the last time, he wrote in the Book of Honor, avec émotion et espérance. With emotion and hope. So this is what we're trying to do. Emotion, we're trying to recreate here the emotion of a home, of a Jewish home, of the Jewish culture, of all those who were once part of our community, being that our neighbors, maybe our relatives, our friends. So this will be all about Holocaust. And one of the case shows will be right here in the middle, showing the way of Elie Wiesel from Sighet to Auschwitz, just about what you guys are doing now with your study tour. But we're not going to focus on this, and I'm going to invite you into this room. And yeah, I know Mr. O'Connor can tell the difference because he's been here, so I hope you can see the change.
It's magnificent.
Thank you.
It's absolutely magnificent.
Thank you.
It's the word's already tangible, and it's
Yes.
It's so vibrant. It's so incredibly vibrant. It's wow.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Forgive me, I must smile on because this just looks just marvelous. the restoration of the common unit works. It's
Yes.
the walls, it's just magnificent.
Yes, it's not quite yet done. We still have some small details, but what we were trying to recreate as we wrote in the application is to dramatize the last days of Elie Wiesel in Sighet. So we took his memoirs and all the elements that he mentioned there: the radio, the carpets, the curtains, the emotion, the table set for Shabbat. We tried to save that and to keep it out of time. So this would have looked like. The house would have looked like, his house would have looked like in his last days before he was deported. Now, I'm going back to a little bit of history. The Jews in Sighet got here in the 17th century, and the first mention is at the end of the 17th century. They were already here, and they got here due to the pogroms that were going on in, back then, Galicia, which was Poland and Ukraine, that area. So they got here and stayed and settled here because, as you could all see, this area is surrounded by hills and mountains. The roads were very difficult to pass, all this forests, and they found a population that was used to other ethnic presences of other religions, so they stayed. They were able to stay here, they remained here, and they settled everywhere. And that's how we ended up having these two beautiful communities, one from the countryside, the rural Jewish community, and one from Sighet or Vichet, which were urban communities, slightly different from the ones from the countryside, meaning that the communities like this one from Sighet were cultured into Hungarian culture, and they were very much into theater and art and reading, but in the same time, because we were speaking last night of Hasidism, we had a very vibrant Hasidic community. And I would like you to take a look at the window over there and see 3 Hasidic dynasties. Of course, Hasidism is now very trendy, and I'm addressing now to the youngsters. I'm sure you've all seen Unorthodox. So Unorthodox is a theme that comes from Sighet. Yoel Teitelbaum, the person who generated this Hasidic dynasty, the Satmar dynasty, was born in Sighet, and then he went to Satu Mare, which is close by, like 100 kilometers from Sighet. And Hasidic dynasties are being born due to the charisma of a person. So this, he was very charming, but in the same time very knowledgeable, and he was able to create this dynasty. But he was not the only one, because we also had the Spinka Dynasty, which is a village, Săpânța. You've all heard of Mary Cemetery. That's Spinka. Spinka is in Yiddish. And we also had the Krechnev dynasty. The Krechnev dynasty is, Crăciunești is a village very close by to Sighet, 8 kilometers away. But actually in Krechnev, more than 50% of the population was Jewish. So it was, proportionally speaking, it was the largest Jewish population in Hungary at that time, in the past centuries. And then we decided to put Rabbi Danzig separately, because Sighet had a liberal community. So, as Elie Wiesel said, they were not all Chabotnik Jews. We also had modern liberal Jews who spoke excellent German, excellent Romanian. Actually, Rabbi Danzig was for 30 years member of the city council. He was an important member of the local community. And this place was designated in order to go back to what study means in Jewish culture. You see in that window over there an important collection. I think that's our most valuable collection of religious Jewish books that were printed in Sighet. I'm sure for most of us, printing is not something special today, but just imagine at the beginning of the 19th century, that was huge. So in a small place like Sighet, this was a typical shtetl. In a small place like Sighet, to have 200 printed Jewish religious books was pretty big. And what's important and most magical is that rabbis, as I told you last night, rabbis around the world were ordering their book to be printed especially in Sighet, because there was a specific kind of energy, there was a specific kind of vibration that only Sighet had. So if we look into the stamps of the books inside, we can see that rabbis from New York or Jerusalem order their book to be printed in Sighet. So very special place. I hope you will you will feel that. I would stop now to ask if you have any questions. I don't want to be the only one speaking or any comments at this point. Please.
I would like to address a question. Did we have only Yiddish speakers or also Hebrew speakers?
Hebrew, what we call today modern Hebrew, is a very new language. Jews from Maramuresh and Jews in Eastern Europe did not speak Hebrew. Hebrew was the religious language, the language spoken well, it was mostly used in the synagogue and for prayers and for a religious service, but everybody spoke Yiddish. Yiddish is 70% German language with a specific kind of grammar, very easy grammar, and influences of the region. There's Polish Yiddish, Romanian Yiddish, Hungarian Yiddish, Latvic Yiddish, so on and so forth. So they spoke Yiddish at home, very good Hungarian, very good Romanian. Actually, the interwar press is debating on various articles about the competition between Hungarians and Jews. Which one speaks better Romanian? And apparently, the Jews spoke better Romanian than the Hungarians. Yes, so they spoke all the languages. Actually, that's a good part of a place like Sighet, that most of the people speak all the languages of the area. Anybody else?
I just want to underline something. In 1938, in Sighet existed 8 printing houses. Now we have just one, but it's not important to read today. But
Yeah.
now
Yes.
between the wars were 8 printing houses.
That's
All
huge.
belongs
To Jewish.
family.
I was going to ask, were they family printing houses?
Not
or
all
were
of
they-
them, but some of them, yes. They were son and
Was, for example, Kaufman family, yes.
Yeah, it was son and
there
father.
were rich families. Yes.
Okay.
yeah.
And
But they were not necessarily related to each other. It was just, yeah.
It was a
But they're not,
competition.
I'm sorry, but they weren't like Signet, like is a gigantic corporation of printers. These were family print houses that were printing Jewish works or even
Not
Romanian.
not only.
Also
all
Romanian
kinds of
papers and so on. And
newspapers.
They served the entire Europe
Community,
probably.
yeah,
Wow, okay.
yeah.
They received demands from Budapest and so on.
Right.
Yeah.
From part of now Ukraine.
Impressive.
Yes, yes, we think so too. Okay, anybody else?
Another question.
Yes?
How many Jewish schools were then in Sighet?
Well, the Jewish school has the following structure. There's the Heder and there's the yeshiva. The Heder begins at 3. Jewish boys go to school. Unfortunately, at that time, Jewish girls did go to school, but later in the interwar time, it was usually homeschooling. So the Heders were several Heders. A Heder could mean a house like this with a room with 20 pupils. So there were various Heders. And then there were 2 yeshivas. Yeshiva Ktana in Talmud Torah synagogue and the big yeshiva, Yeshiva Gdola, which was where the former great synagogue was. So we are speaking of two type of schools, but there was a big yeshiva with hundreds of bocher. That was the name of the students. They would come from all over Maramuresh, and it was very common. Even the Wiesel family hosted a bocher and helped him to study. It was very common Jewish families to take in a youngster to help him study. It's the greatest honor in a Jewish family for a girl to marry a scholar. So it doesn't matter the money, the family, but if he studies Torah and the Talmud, that's the greatest honor. And girls, let me tell you, it was not the girl who married and went with the boy's family. It was the boy who came with the girl's family. So he was a guest. Yes. Anybody else? Speaking, yes?
How many times Elie Wiesel did visit the
Sighet.
house? Yes, Sighet after the Second World War.
Fortunately and unfortunately, unfortunately, it was only in 1964 that Elie Wiesel came back for the first time in Sighet. It was a very emotional return back home. But then he came back in '65 with Harold Becker filming team, and he did a film on his return back home. And then he came back in '84, in '95 with his son and his nephew. And then the last time he was here in 2002. So we know of these times when he came back. Unfortunately, the first time he came, there was already somebody else living inside the house. 1 year after deportation, so he was deported in 1944 in May with the rest of the Jewish community, and I'm making a parenthesis now. We're speaking about 40,000 Jews that lived in Maramuresh. We're speaking about, and pay attention and please remember, 38,000 Jews that were deported, and please remember, we're speaking of 2,300 Jews that came back after the war. Other figures, 38.2% of local population from Sighet was Jewish, of a population of 27,000 people. So you can imagine how this place looked like after May 1944. So 1 year after the deportation, I'm going back. 1 year after the deportation, one of the sisters came back. Elie Wiesel survived and 2 other sisters. One of the sisters came back, and she came into the house, he stepped into the house, and there was already somebody else living inside the house. But at that time, those who came back in Sighet wanted to join or to recreate a nucleus of Jewish community. So there was somebody else inside, the furniture and everything was still here. But when Elie Wiesel comes back in 1964, he says that in his room, above his bed, where used to hang the portrait of his rabbi, there was a cross. So we know for sure that it was a Christian who lived in the house at that time. But me personally, I met Jewish and non-Jewish families who lived in this house. This house was nationalized after the war, and it was rented to various families, usually socially assisted families or members of the community who needed a place to stay. So,
how large was his family living in this house?
The house was bought at the end of the 19th century by Elie Wiesel's grandparents. And it was very fortunate that we had this grant, because we went deeper into the history of this building. And what we discovered with the architect that we worked with is that the house is as old as the 18th century. But apparently it only had this part, and probably this side here was added after the Wiesels bought the house. So originally it belonged to the grandparents, and then Elie Wiesel and 3 other sisters and the 2 parents lived at this house. But let us not forget that in the first room there was a shop of the family. Now, to eliminate any kind of cliches and stereotypes, a shop does not mean they were rich. There were people who came at the museum and said, you know, they were not doing so well because they just bought from one place and resold here, so it was not that great. But in the same time, they did have a holiday a year. They used to go to Borsha. It's a place close by. So they spent a week there in the mountains. So they were a middle-class family. Yes? Yes.
Elie Wiesel's family was a secular or a religious one?
It was a religious family. It was a very religious family, I would say. They were not ultra-Orthodox, meaning that Elie Wiesel never weighed payas. But they were Hasidic Jews, especially due to the influence of Dodi Fig. That was the maternal grandfather who used to be a chazan in the great synagogue here in Sighet, and it was him who taught Elie Wiesel to sing. So maybe you will be curious enough to Google a bit Elie Wiesel singing, and I can assure you that you will get chills when you hear Elie Wiesel singing, That's something that very few people know about Elie Wiesel, but that's really overwhelming. So they were Hasidic, especially Elie Wiesel was a Hasidic Jew, and we were speaking a bit last night about the Kabbalah, and he was very drawn into the Kabbalah, the Jewish mysticism, and it was him and some other friends who tried to get to study, but the Talmud clearly says that you are not allowed to get close to the Kabbalah until you are at the maturity time, meaning 30, 40, depends on the person. And they were doing that, and some of the guys, some of the boys he studied with at the Talmud Torah synagogue got mad because it's a very sensitive topic and it's very profound and not everybody's ready to do that. And his father said, you know, maybe you should quit studying the Kabbalah. Look at what happened to Shloimi and look what happened to Itzhak and so on. You should go into modern Hebrew and, you know, to study a bit the secular things. And Elie Wiesel said, what do I need? We're in Sighet. Why do I need to study Hebrew, modern Hebrew? Who uses modern Hebrew? This is Sighet. But, and this is what I tell this story, especially to younger students. Sometimes it's important to listen to our parents because apparently after the war, it was the modern Hebrew who saved Elie Wiesel. This is how he became to be the Hebrew correspondent, the modern Hebrew correspondent for Yediot Aharonot, which was at that time the Israeli newspaper, very poor, but by the time he quit the office, it became very rich. Now is the most important newspaper in Israel. So yes, he was religious. He remained religious, even if during the time of deportation and ghetto, there was a constant fight, but the fight went on, but on various and different levels after deportation. But he remained a Hasidic Jew, and we call him a neo-Hasidic Jew, which is a contemporary combination between traditional culture and adapting to conditions of contemporaneity.
How many of the objects around here were original from the Wiesel family? Because I imagine that after the house was rented, one after another family came here, a lot of the original objects could have been lost. So I heard you saying some information about the objects that we can see in this room, and they are from the Jewish community. But how many of the objects are from the Wiesel family exactly? What remained here?
I'm going to keep silent and tell you none. And we should all keep silent for a second or two, because as we don't have anything here in the museum, you can imagine how empty is the history of this place, because most of the things are gone. The presence of the Jews in Sighet is absent and present, extremely vivid in the same time. I know it's a paradox, but they're here and they're no longer here. So what you see inside the museums are various objects gathered from different Jewish families from the area. Unfortunately, all the family belongings we don't know what happened. It might have been destroyed, stolen, just replaced. Other people lived here, they didn't care, they just wanted to move on with their lives. So unfortunately, nothing belongs to the Wiesel family.
And some objects we have from the History Museum from Cluj-Napoca.
Yes, they're part of their collection. They were bought through that museum for the use of this museum, because this museum was the first Jewish museum open, besides the Choral Temple from Bucharest. This was the first Jewish museum ever opened in Romania in 2002.
Because we are talking about Jewish, I want to underline again that a representative of local small communities, Mr.
Sorin Marcos. Yes, he's also our partner at the museum, and he's an active member of the Jewish community and a very dear friend to our museum. Yes.
Dacă tot m-ați introdus, aș trebui să vă întreb care este rolul acestei cărți al domnului Maier Iacobovici, care e locul acestei cărți de care ți-am povestit, Alina, în Casa Elie Wiesel?
Proiectul pe care, the project that Mr. Marcus proposed was the translation of a memory, a memorabilia that we would like to launch somewhere in this fall maybe. And we are trying to create a collection of memorabilia of all the former residents of Sighet and Maramureș, especially survivors, so we can address various issues regarding otherness or stereotypes or Jewish culture, so on. So he will be the first one who will open this series of collection. Hopefully the translation will be done soon enough and we can inaugurate it maybe when we officially reopen the entire museum.